Welcome to Innovation in Government. I'm Jason Miller. My guest today is Dennis Riley, the Vice President of Federal at Gigamon. Dennis, welcome to the discussion.
Thank you, Jason.
Before we get started, let me set some context for our conversation today. When it comes to cybersecurity, I think there's two ways to measure agency progress. The first is straight numbers. If you look at reports from agency inspectors general or the Government Accountability Office, agencies still have a steep hill to climb. For example, in the December 2018 report, GAO found only 6 of 24 agencies met all 9 of the cross-agency priority goals for cybersecurity. Auditors also found most of the selected 23 agencies that they looked at have not fully implemented the tools or services available through the first 2 phases of the Homeland Security Department's Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation, or CDM program. But then there's the second way to measure agency progress, and that's around impact. Over the last 2, maybe 3 years, how many federal cyber incidents have we heard about, have made big news? You know, Dennis, I'll be honest, I have a hard time thinking of many of the cyber incidents these days that make the big news. Now, whether we're becoming numb about it because there's just so many, or maybe we just don't remember them, or whether agencies just aren't being as public as they used to be about it, that's hard to say. But I think there's definitely a feeling across the federal sector, based on how agencies survived WannaCry, NotPetya threats, and the visibility from tools under CDM. Agencies are in a better place today to protect their data and their networks against cyber attacks than ever before. But we know cybersecurity requires agencies to be in constant state of vigilance and improvement. So how do they get there? And what role does CDM play in taking over for agencies over the next few years? Well, again, that's where my guest comes in. Dennis, let's talk about CDM, Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation, major administration priority. They're making some progress. I sound like a GAO report, progress made, more progress needed. What's the current state of CDM from your perspective?
Well, I do think progress is being made, but as you say, the adversary never sleeps. So how do you keep up and get ahead? That's the challenge. I think what we're hearing from agencies is they still need more funding and they need more technology. People are important as well. There's some initiatives from the Trump administration on that, but that's going to take a while to have an effect. I do think that the agencies are looking to technology to be a force multiplier that they can deploy quickly. We've seen a good example of that recently. Office of Personnel Management, through CDM gap fill in the current phase, made some major acquisitions for next generation network packet brokers and other cybersecurity tools to plug some known holes that they couldn't address during phase 1 because there simply wasn't enough budget support. So progress is being made, but the enemy doesn't sleep, so there's still a lot to do.
Now, I think that's a great example you bring up about OPM and gap fills, because I know one of the important things about CDM was, especially the defend piece, which is the latest set of RFPs that have been out, is to do those gap fills. Is that where agencies are at today? You think most are kind of looking at, okay, what went well in phase 1 and phase 2, but what are our needs, immediate needs today?
Some still have gap fill requirements, but I think the program office and the agencies are looking forward to things like securing the cloud and more visibility into endpoints with network access control. Next generation packet brokers play a role in both those areas. You need to be able to secure and see all your network traffic on the physical network, your virtual environment, and now with more and more agencies shifting workloads to the cloud, you have to be able to extend that visibility into the cloud, because you need to be able to see if there's a breach, if there's lateral movement, could be command and control, staging for exfiltration, or if data is being exfiltrated as well. And the other area that we're seeing a lot of emphasis is we have to be able to handle encrypted traffic, because 70 to 80% of the traffic now is encrypted. If you can't see into that encrypted traffic through something called break and inspect, you're blind to too much of the threat.
When you talk about encrypted traffic, are you talking more than just HTTPS traffic, or are people actually adding whatever SHA 256 or whatever it is now these days to their traffic?
So you're looking at SSL and TLS traffic, and what used to be considered a secure channel is now a threat vector. And so the adversaries have figured that out. They can now masquerade in those encrypted channels and go largely undetected. Some of that happened in the OPM breach. And that's one of the reasons why it took so long to discover the breach. So that's a big area of emphasis that we're seeing from different agencies, both in DoD and on the civilian side.
And that brings us actually, as a great segue to the cloud discussion too. You talk about a lot of agencies are looking at how to secure within the cloud. And it's not the clouds themselves they're worried about, or is it the data that passes in between? Meaning, if I'm sending an email to Dennis and then I have to go out of my cloud into your cloud, what part of the cloud are we looking at security? Because we already have FedRAMP, so we know those clouds are secure, or they should be. So what are we talking about, the traffic?
So you make a great distinction there, Jason, because it's a shared responsibility model. The cloud service providers, the Amazon Web Services, the Googles, the Microsoft, they're responsible for security of the cloud, but the security of the data and the applications in the cloud remains the responsibility of the federal agency. So the Chief Information Officer and the Chief Information Security Officer and the head of the departments and agencies remain responsible for the data. So they have to be able to see the data even if it's in the cloud, and make sure they're protecting it. If you can't see it, you can't secure it. So they need pervasive visibility on the physical network, the virtual space, and out into the cloud as well, because they're responsible.
And that's where this encryption piece comes in as well, because more and more people are sending the encrypted packets. So again, the term you use, I think, see it and break it, or break it and see it, find it and break it.
Break it, inspect.
I ruined it, didn't I, for you there for a second? What are there tools out there currently that come under CDM that let you do both the security of the data and the systems within the cloud, but also the break and inspect piece?
There are, and Gigamon happens to be one of them. And we talked about the Office of Personnel Management a minute ago. So one of the things that they acquired in their gap fill purchase through CDM recently was the ability to inspect inline traffic that's encrypted, and that's what we talk about when we talk about break and inspect. So it's well recognized now, with 70-80% of the traffic being encrypted, you've got to be able to break it, decrypt it, inspect it, re-encrypt it, and then send it on down the network line.
And that has to be done automatically, I mean, quickly, because otherwise it's like, well, I sent you that email and then 6 days later you got it. I mean, we have some expectations of agility and speed.
Absolutely, and that's been one of the challenges in the past, because if you ask cybersecurity tools to do that individually, what it does is it takes a tremendous amount of their compute cycle, so there's a big performance hit, sometimes as much as 50 to 80% reduced efficiency. So if you can have a next generation packet broker do it once for multiple tools, it's a tremendous productivity gain.
And I think that's, we have this expectation, again, of speed. So if you put in a security tool that slows things down, people get very frustrated. And once again, security gets that bad rap of, oh, well, once again, security ruins everything. And so I think it's important that that message gets out, as you guys we're talking about today, that we can't fix this. Now, one of the things also about CDM is there's trade-offs need to be made. You talk about gap fills; those decisions were made earlier on by agencies in phase 1 and phase 2. I asked you a little bit about gap fills, but talk maybe broader about how those trade-offs should be made. What are some things agencies should consider?
Sure. So you always want to get the greatest return financially for every dollar you invest. If you're a federal government, be a good steward of the taxpayers' money. But you also want to get the maximum return on readiness and cybersecurity, improve cybersecurity posture for every dollar you invest. So what that leads you to is finding those force multiplying technologies that you would acquire through the CDM program. A great example, again, is a next generation network packet broker, because it helps all your cybersecurity tools and your network and application performance tools work at peak performance. You might have a dozen, 20, maybe even 30 tools in your network to help you see, secure, and manage the data going across that network. If you get all of them to improve just by 20 or 30%, that's a tremendous return. In some cases, next generation network packet brokers can get a 5 times productivity improvement. That's why Forrester Research recently came out with a study and showed that next generation packet brokers can pay for themselves in just 7 months and reduce cybersecurity costs by 50%. So you can get better security and better use of your dollar at the same time. And that's what CIOs and CISOs are looking for. That's
impressive. 5 times productivity improvement, but paid itself back in 7 months, reduced by 50%. Sounds like it's an easy sell for you guys, for a lot of the clients. Where are agencies understanding this piece of filling those gaps, and even next generation packet broker?
Well, agencies have a lot to deal with, and every week there's a new cybersecurity tool on the market. So it's a little bit of a blizzard of information out there. So you have to work hard to help them understand the value. But every CIO and CISO really is looking for the maximum return on that dollar that they've invested, because they have a limited budget. So there's a good story there, and I'm proud to say that Gigamon was the first product added to the CDM program, and that's because we do have that force multiplier effect.
When we talk about CDM more broadly, they're entering what they don't call it phase 3 anymore, but they call it the next, I guess, it was know what's on your network, know who's on your network, and then they started expanding from there. What are some of the trends you're starting to see from CDM in terms of either agency implementation or the requests that you guys see under the Defend task orders, or as agencies come to the SINs, the special item numbers under the schedule piece, what are they asking for? Is there other trends that are standing out?
Well, in addition to the ability to do the break and inspect that we've already talked about, ability to see into the cloud is important as well. And of course, agencies, because of the challenges they face, the threat from the bad actors, always want it to go faster. And I think the CDM program office is doing a good job on turning things around more quickly and also being more responsive to the agency needs. A lot of these requests for services are agency initiated, because the agencies are on the front line, they know their requirements best. And I think the systems integrators and the CDM program office under Kevin Cox have done a good job at being responsive to the agencies in that regard.
I think the one big change in CDM, not just the acquisition perspective, but they really are trying to listen more to the agencies. And I think that's important because initially this idea of one size fits all almost, or one size fits many, was a hard road for a lot of agencies to go down, because in the end, even though they grouped them together, group A and B and C and D, they weren't always all the same. And I think that they've shifted, and I think they deserve a lot of credit, as you said. As we talk about CDM and going forward, are there big challenges that you as a vendor face over maybe what agencies? We've talked a lot about what agencies face.
So, one of the things that we pride ourselves in industry, and Gigamon in particular, is being innovators. So we're always, listening to our customers and offering solutions that they need. So getting new technologies introduced to CDM faster is something agencies want, and as industry partners, we're anxious to present as well. I think the other challenge going forward is, for the program office, is that the adversary never sleeps. I mean, the Verizon breach report just came out this week, showing 168% more breaches in government than there were last year. A lot of them haven't made the headlines, as you said earlier, but it's happening. So with that, more funding's required because the adversary is well-funded, highly motivated, and nimble. And they work at cyber-relevant speed. Our government doesn't always work that way. It's not designed to work quickly. But if you consider us to be on something of a war footing in cybersecurity, we probably need to change the way our government responds to that, both in terms of resources available and the speed with which we react to the threat.
It's interesting, you brought up funding twice. Now, I remember years ago, you probably remember Karen Evans, who now is over at the Energy Department, but when she was at OMB, she would say, and then that cyber funding back then was only about, I think it was $6 billion a year in the civilian world at the very least. And she said, there's plenty of funding, you just have to reallocate it. Do you get a sense that agencies are so tied up in protecting legacy systems, and this maybe takes us down a path of IT modernization a little bit, but that they really can't peel off money to protect against new threats or against new, to get off that technical debt side of the discussion?
Right, so there's been quite a few reports saying 80% of the standard agency IT budget goes to maintaining legacy systems. So as agencies are going through digital transformation and looking to modernize their infrastructure, there's not a lot of money left over. But that's where I think a program like CDM becomes even more critical, because that was Congress's way of giving a booster shot to cybersecurity. I just think we need a stronger booster shot, because the adversary just keeps investing more and more in terms of machine learning, round-the-clock operations, and it's just very challenging for us to keep up. We can't hire enough good people and retain them in government. We have to keep working on that, but we really need to use force-multiplying technologies to help us get ahead, or catch up, get ahead, and stay ahead.
You brought up the work that the administration is doing around cybersecurity and workforce. There's a Reskilling Academy. There's a new executive order as well that just recently came out around workforce. So they're trying to do some changes, but as you said, it's going to be a while until that catches up. In the meantime, I think a lot of agencies are looking at AI, at machine learning, and even at automation as the key here. So I think there's an opportunity, which is good.
There is, and underlying all this is that you need to be able to know who's on your network, know what's happening on your network, and be able to see how the data is transversing the network. If you can't see the data, you don't know what's going on. So you have to have that pervasive visibility in the physical network and the virtual environment and into the cloud so that you can see, defend, and manage your network. You want it to be secure and operate at a high level so that your customers are satisfied with the performance they're getting out of their applications.
It's that balance, absolutely. Dennis, let's take a quick break and come back. We can jump into some other topics that are hot in the cybersecurity world. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carahsoft on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.